Welcome to episode 14 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I am your host, Matthew Benko. In this episode titled Joint Operations, Shane Smith and I share our experiences as C-130 air crew members in the Marine Corps and Air Force. We discuss the unique aspects of our training, the diverse missions we undertake, and the camaraderie that defines our roles. Shane delves into the development of the Harvest Hawk, a modified C-130 for close air support, created in collaboration with Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin. We explore the importance of embracing discomfort and change, the necessity of discipline and determination, and the role of core values in overcoming challenges. We conclude with reflections on the current state of the world and the need for strong leaders to guide us into the future. Tune in for insights into C-130 aviation and the enduring spirits of service members. Let's get started. Hey, Shane. Thank you so much for being here on the Acknowledge Action podcast. It's really great to reconnect with you. I know we're going to have an awesome conversation. You have some amazing C-130 experience as a Marine, which is really cool. I have C-130 experience as an Air Force Loadmaster, you as a Marine Loadmaster. So I'm really excited to see where this conversation is going to go. But Shane, welcome. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, it's been a minute. I think we were talking. It's been about 13 years since we were together at Little Rock.
Yeah. And in anticipation and reflecting on those experiences, I cross-trained into being a C-130 Loadmaster from being an aircraft weapons loader. So, you know, I think we were both E5s. I was a staff sergeant, and you're E5 in the Marine Corps at the time, which is sergeant, right?
Yeah.
So we were both E5s, and that's how we connected. I had no idea that part of my training was going to be with some Marine crewmasters. Is that what you guys are called?
Yeah, so it was an interesting transition. So we originally had two different positions: crew chief, who sat in the front with the pilots and monitor all the systems and everything, and a loadmaster in the back who would handle all the cargo. And then the Marine Corps had the brilliant idea to combine the two most technical jobs in the Marine Corps and make a crewmaster, which is a crew chief and loadmaster cross-trained individual. So that's why I was in Little Rock doing the Loadmaster version of the training after being a crew chief for multiple years.
Okay, that's what it was. I remember you telling me about that, like, because you did you were like the flight engineer, the crew chief, but then you were learning the Loadmaster piece of it.
Right, yeah. It could be kind of complicated. So flight engineer is what it was called on the old Legacy aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the J model of the C-130 came out, the Marine Corps decided to designate that as a crew chief instead of a flight engineer.
Cool. We're going to talk more about that because I could talk about C-130s all day. I know, like you said, it's been 13 years. We've been staying in somewhat contact, but this is like our first catch-up conversation in a while. So I want to capture all that and go over some of the similarities we have between services and the C-130 world, at least, and see where it's taking you and see where your journey's taking you. So yeah, I can't thank you enough for being here, and I was really excited because to date, today I dropped episode 12. So I've had a number of Air Force folks on here. I've had some Navy folks, and I have some Army. So you're my first Marine, man, that I got to interview on the Acknowledge to Action podcast, and you happen to be a C-130 guy, which is, in my book, is a win-win, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, that's pretty awesome. But man, we're excited to hear your journey. So just walk, 'cause I know you said you listened to a couple episodes, and you got a feel for it. But really, this is your time and your opportunity to share with us your journey, how you got into the Marine Corps, how you got that MOS, and what your aviation career was like as an enlisted aviator in the Marines. So just kind of walk us through. However you want to start, and just talk to us about your decision to join the military and highlight some key moments, some challenges along the way.
So I think it's a little dated at this point, but honestly, my biggest inspiration for joining the military was when I was a kid. I watched the original Top Gun movie.
Okay.
With Tom Cruise, and I was like, that's awesome. I want to be a pilot. I kept that inspiration until I was in high school. I actually took the ASVAB to get out of a class in high school, scored pretty high on it, and decided that that was 100%. I want to go to the military. Once I went to the recruiter, I wanted to go be a pilot, and then I found out, like everyone I'm sure knows who's in the military, that you have to go get a degree and then go through a bunch of other training, and you might be lucky to touch an aircraft 9-10 years after you start going to college. It's a very long process to become a pilot, especially like a fighter pilot or something. Once I heard that, I was like, I don't know if I really want to be a pilot anymore. That seems like a long commitment, to maybe be a pilot in 10 years. So I was going to join infantry. I was 17 at the time. My mom said, absolutely not. You're not joining the military, and definitely not the Marine Corps. And then I said, okay, well, I'll just wait till I'm 18 and then I'll just join anyways in, 6 months or whatever. And so she said, okay, I'll sign the paperwork, but the one stipulation is you're not allowed to join infantry. You have to pick another job. So I went into the recruiter and I said, I can't be infantry. What else do you got? And he said, well, that depends. What else interests you? And I was like, I don't know. Planes are pretty cool. Like, what do you have for planes that's, for enlisted? And he said flight engineer. I said, I have no idea what that means. Like, what is that? And he's like, oh, you could, be on the plane. You could fix it, go with the pilots. I was like, that sounds really cool. Let's go for that. And that's how it started. And even then, like I said, I was 17 when I went to boot camp. I actually turned 18 in boot camp. And I'm sure the Air Force is the same way. But, like, I didn't let anyone know that in boot camp until after it was over, because it would have been a day full of hazing if you had let it slip that it was your birthday while you're in boot camp. So once I got out of there, did MCT, the Marine Combat Training, went down to Pensacola for aircrew school. And while you're there, you essentially get put into two categories. If you need glasses or need some kind of corrective device for your eyes, you can't fly on helicopters, right? You have to have good vision to be a helicopter crew chief or any other kind of service member on that. I was lucky enough that I have good vision. I don't need glasses or anything. So they asked me, do you want to go fixed wing or do you want to go, helos? And I said, I have no idea what the difference is between those two.
Yeah. Fixed wing. Like.
Yeah. The guy was like, well, 22s, 53s, 46s. And I'm like, man, you're just saying numbers to me. I have no idea what any of that means.
Yeah.
He was like, well, do you want to sit on a door and be the gunner, like in Full Metal Jacket? Or do you want to, sit on a plane? And I was like, being like a door gunner in Full Metal Jacket sounds pretty awesome. I was like, but he goes, yeah, and if you pick fixed wing, the only thing the Marine Corps has for you to fly on is the C-130. You don't fly on anything. There's no crew chiefs that fly on, FA-18s or anything else.
Oh, yeah. It's the only crew. Yeah, I see. It's the crew.
So
crew
the
only
chiefs,
enlisted.
So crew chiefs for fixed wing in the Marine Corps, if you're not C-130, you don't fly on the aircraft at all. You're just the one that signs off when the pilot takes off, and you don't see the plane again until it comes back. So I was like, so what about C-130s? Like, what's the big deal with those? And like, oh, those are the big cargo planes. When they go places, they stay in hotels and they can't go on ships. So you don't have to be at sea for 6 months at a time. And I was like, I'm sold. That's what I wanted to do C-130s.
Yeah.
So I kind of stumbled into it. I didn't know what a C-130 was when I was 17. I didn't know what any of them were. And I just got lucky enough that I just picked the right thing that worked out well for me.
Yeah. So you get, now this is just my personal opinion, you get probably the coolest aircraft in all the DoD, right? C-130. And I'll say this, because I know, and you get the coolest uniform too. You got the coolest uniform in the Marine Corps, and you got to work on the coolest aircraft, in my opinion. So, man, that's a win-win, man. Who knew, right? That's really cool how you went along for that. Like, you just knew, you identified, like, I want to go into the military. You picked the Marine Corps, and you had a general idea, aviation sense, and then you just kind of figured it out along the way. And that's, I feel like that's pretty common in the, because I don't want to be that guy, but like I turned 18 in basic too, and I took the same strategy you did. I'm like, I'm not telling anybody. That's crazy, you just I learned regardless of all the services on the branch. I know Air Force gets dogged a lot, but you don't want to stand out. You just want
Yeah.
to do your thing and just get through the 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 training and go on to your advanced training and all that. Um, but my point is figuring out along the way, going in when you're 17, 18 and all that. So talk a little bit about that. So you identified that, you acknowledged that, right? You at some point, in high school said, this is what I want to do. And that the power of acknowledgement, the reason why I focus on this podcast was in our checklist. Again, I know just from being at Little Rock with you, from a crew perspective, the power of acknowledgement, the word acknowledgement is so powerful over word. After takeoff checks, everyone has to acknowledge them. Combat entry checklist, acknowledge. Anything we're doing in an operational sense, whether you're the aircraft commander to the loadmaster, everyone has to acknowledge the power of acknowledgement. So you did that. I want to acknowledge your acknowledgement, how you were able to identify that and then figure it out from there. So how long were you in? So you did that. You did talk a little bit more about the dynamic. You went in as a crew chief. You picked the fixed wing. You did the C-130 thing, and then kind of provide somewhat more of the backstory, because I met you were, I don't know how many years you were in at that point, but you were a sergeant in the Marine Corps when we connected at Little Rock and did some of our training together at Little Rock Air Force Base for the C-130 Air Crew World. What was your experience in the Marine Corps with the C-130 and aviation up until that point?
Yeah. So, a quick tangent. You mentioned that I chose the Marine Corps. Uh, Funny enough, I actually went to the Air Force recruiter first.
Okay.
Um, the stereotypical, there's a strip mall and all the recruiters were lined up, just one after the other. Because I wanted to go on aircraft originally and be a pilot, I, obviously assumed Air Force would be the first choice because that's where all the planes are, right? I went in, and to try to make this as clean and respectful as possible, the Air Force recruiter was just so disrespectful that I left, and I was like, "There's no way I'm not joining that." On the way out, Sergeant Eric Adams, a Marine recruiter, was in full dress blues and caught me walking out of the Air Force recruiter, and he said, "Hey man, where are you going?" And I was like, "I just, I went to the Air Force recruiter. Not really my thing. I think I'll just go home." He said, "Well, why don't you come talk to me for a minute?" And I didn't know at the time. Again, I was pretty gung ho to go to the military, but I had no idea about a lot of the history and the differences between branches.
Yeah.
And he explained to me about the whole, everyone knows that Marines are extremely prideful, right? And there's something to be said for that. That I think one of the biggest differences between most of the branches is the Marine Corps has instilled in its people that mentality that it doesn't matter what it is, you can and you are going to do it,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's taking back Iwo Jima, it's the island hopping campaign, it's uh, Belleau Wood in France. There's time and time again that Marines have overwhelmed superior forces, and I think the vast majority of that is just the mentality, and that it gets drilled into you that you are that force for the United States, right? Like you're the one who's expected to go in with 10-1 odds and still come out on top. So after talking to him, I was like, you know what, Marine Corps sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll give it a shot. Um, as you mentioned, to fast forward, so once I got in and did all that, when we met, I was 6 years in
Okay.
to my career, which was 9 years total. I reenlisted once after my 5-year contract, and then after the second after the first reenlistment, I decided to leave at 9 years. That could be a whole conversation in itself, the reason I left. But overall, it was an extremely beneficial experience for me. I got to go to, I think the last count was 80 something countries in 9 years.
Wow.
Um, I got to taxi turn a $70 million aircraft, a C-130, when I was 20 years old as a corporal. So, um, this is experiences like that. Like one of my best friends from here in Florida, he's never left the country. He's worked the same job basically his whole life. So, not to diminish that, obviously, we need people that are going to,
Yeah.
work at stores and be general managers and all this stuff. But I can see the difference between the world knowledge between me and him. Like, going to somewhere like Singapore and Australia and all these other places and seeing the different cultures and how people interact, and just having that understanding that no matter what culture you go to, in my opinion, people are people. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
with all the turmoil in the world right now, at the end of the day, most people, especially the average citizen in any country, is just the same person. They want to make the world better for their children, and they want their kids and their family to be safe, and that's basically what they want at the end of the day.
That's a great message, and I can absolutely understand and relate to that. I don't know what my number is as far as countries I've visited, but I can tell you this: 2 years ago, when we'll call it a TDY/deployment, it was more of a TDY. Um, did 19 countries in like 30 days or something like that for what we were doing over there, right? And you're absolutely right. When you it's one thing to read about a culture and have a general understanding of it just through a presentation of it, but to experience it is incredibly impactful, right? And what you said is like, I think most people on this planet, human beings, we just want a better life for one another, regardless of what language we speak, what religion we choose, our faith, what type of even food. Well, food is a huge social influence too, and but at the end of the day, it's about, like you said, having that I just want things to be good and better for my family or for myself moving forward, and having those experiences as air crew is pretty special. Well, whether it's in a deployed environment where we're just hacking the mish. I don't know if the Marines call it. I can't believe I just said that. I said to myself, I'm never going to say that. Hacking the mish. I just said it. But or going for like a TDY. There are some really. It's just how it is. I mean, there are a lot of benefits being air crew, and because you get to see parts of the world where a lot of our fellow service members don't, and you get to experience that in a way that few people do. And I think, again, I don't know if this number is accurate by any means. Air Force, right? Everyone, you know, oh, you fly, you're a pilot. No, but I think 1% of the Air Force flies, like 1%. So it's 1% of the 1% of like very few individuals actually get to really get in an aircraft, let alone be operational with it. I can imagine it's only
Yeah.
same. The statistics are the same with the Marine Corps as far as like, all right, you get, well, whatever that number is, X amount of Marines, and then a very small percentage are going to be air crew, let alone enlisted air crew, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
especially you look at it, I think we joked even back then that Little Rock had more C-130s on the one base for the Air Force than the entire Marine Corps had combined.
yeah. You remember? Because I'm like, because I asked like, where can you get stationed? I think it was like Cherry Point, right? Cherry Point was a big, and I
Yeah,
forget what the other was
for
there.
active duty, you would either be Cherry Point, North Carolina, Miramar, California, or Okinawa, Japan.
So those were the three,
Those are the
and
only three active duty C-130 squadrons in the Marine Corps. We also have
wow.
two reserves too, but again, that's the reserves, and there's one in Texas and one in New York.
But Little Rock is like the Emerald City of C-130s too, though. I mean, it's there
Yeah,
are a lot there. I mean, I think Dias Air Force Base may be the next second one. They may have three squadrons, but yeah, it's like they have more C-130s in that training squadron that we're temporarily part of for our training. But like you said, for the Marine Corps, it's like there's more here than the whole Marine Corps inventory. So you did the crew chief thing. So were were you a flying crew chief? And then talk a little bit more about that how you found your way into being Air Force calls it career enlisted aviator, CEA. Uh, as far as like when we put our wings on and could log flight hours and we're on the 781 and all that stuff. Um, what is that process for? What was that process for you in the Marine Corps to get to that status, to that loadmaster status?
So just to clarify, yeah. So I was a crew chief first, and then
Okay.
I was never technically a loadmaster. I got my loadmaster certification when we were in Little Rock, but in
Okay.
the Marine Corps, that would have made me a crew master because I was doing both jobs, a crew chief
That's
and
what
a
it was.
loadmaster at
That's
the same
okay.
time.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know it's confusing. I don't know why the Marine Corps did that. I could be wrong about this now, but I remember back in like 2013 or 2012 when I looked it up. I think crew chief was the longest enlisted training path for the Marine Corps, and then loadmaster was in the top like three or four. So you're
So okay.
taking two of the longest, most intense training programs and then combining them. So we went from making a fully qualified crew chief would take from boot camp to the time he was a plane captain, which means you can sign for the plane and go with the pilot yourself. You don't need anyone to babysit you, essentially.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Most people, you're talking close to the 2 year mark from when you join, which is one of the reasons we have a 5 year contract initially instead of a four, like most people. Um,
Interesting.
you're taking that and extending it to, good Lord, 2.5, almost 3 years for crewmaster because you're having to learn everything about the plane as a crew chief and then having to learn everything about loading and restraining everything as a loadmaster.
Yeah. And you guys did airdrop too. You guys did the airdrop portion as well.
Yeah. That is one of the very cool things, I think, as being a Marine Corps crew chief, is that, but again, some of the people listening to this or watching this might not. The Marine Corps and the Air Force, you would think we do something very similar as far as C-130s, since we have essentially the same job and essentially the same aircraft, and we're both in the U.S. military. But the Marine Corps, because we have so few squadrons and so few numbers compared to the Air Force, um, we don't have separate squadrons for separate missions. If you're in the Marine Corps and you fly C-130s, you're it. You do airdrop, you do battlefield illumination, you do cargo transport, you do low-level altitude tactics. I mean, name it. You do it on a C-130, which again is really cool, but also makes your training much much longer because you need to be a expert in every single aspect of that plane.
Interesting. I do know this. This is a little. I don't know how official or unofficial this is, Air Force wise. So what you just said, as far as like the C-130 community for the Marine Corps, where like if you're assigned to C-130 unit, you're doing Air Force. We call it air land. And that's just the cargo on and off, right? Air land stuff, and then airdrop. Because the C-130 is so tactical,
Mm-hmm.
and because of what they do, I know that every C-130 Loadmaster I know, regardless of what squadron there is, goes through the airdrop portion because of the significance of the C-130. Now, when you start going to other airframes in the Air Force, like C-17, then it speaks to that model as far as like, okay, if you're not in a C-17 airdrop qualified unit, you may never see an airdrop in your whole career as a C-17 Loadmaster. C-5 Loadmaster is never going to see airdrop because C5s don't airdrop. But I think the C-130 dynamics more similar than not with the Marine Corps as far as like airdrops go, to airland stuff, to do the low level flying and the tactical flying and assault landings, all
Yeah,
this
rapid
how.
ground refueling, aerial refueling.
Yeah, well, we just started doing. There's I don't want to give away national secrets here, no, but they're starting to make like a whole airman concept where we do like specialized fuel loading now. It's like SFO, special fuel operations, which was never part of our. So it's very interesting what the C-130 community does, both in the Air Force and in the Marine Corps. So that's
Yeah,
I'll say, like I said, it's real good to connect with you because it was really cool and interesting to see because you and I connected at Little Rock because we were both prior service. You were established as a E5 sergeant. I was established as an E5 staff sergeant. So we had a little more base liberties. It wasn't going through. We were on a Air Force calls it pipeline, where you had to march to school and you had to.
Yeah.
We had a little more freedom and range as far as what we were able to do. So I think you were the only other like prior service E5. So that's how we connected, and we ended up doing some cool stuff together. But it allowed me to learn some of the what you did as a Marine Corps. I remember one story you said because I think I think you guys, when I say you guys, the Marines already had the J models. Like the J model was a thing. Like the J's were here. Air Force was just starting to make that transition as far as with active duty, guard, and whatnot. And in fact, when we went to the schoolhouse, we were still flying on H models.
Hmm.
And I think a couple, if not a year or two, say 2012, because it was 2011 when we met. We were in the same training that summer, 2011. I think soon after that, the legacy units, the H model world, right? The active duty got rid of all their H's and went to J's. Anyway, I remember you were telling me a story about a J model, and I think I forget how it came up, but we were talking about the differences between this is what we're gonna get from a Loadmaster perspective with J's with the ADS system. We're gonna get this old ADS system, air delivery system, to an electronic upgraded one. I think you told me you're like Marine Corps is like we want the J's, but we want the old school ADS systems, right? Is that
Yeah.
am I remember that correctly?
Yep. Yeah, we still
Okay.
had the manual releases for the locks and everything for the cargo in the back.
Instead of all the I'm still I'm still a legacy guy in the guard, so I don't have much experience on the J as far as I don't know what the new system's called, but I remember that story. Like, yeah, we're take this, we're take the is it six bladed prop, the new props, the all
Yeah, the
the
Dowdy.
advanced upgrade, all the upgraded avionics on the front end, but we went at old school, classic like Marine, like we just
Yeah,
we just want the
exactly. I was going to say the Marine Corps is the equivalent of the guy who goes to the dealership and asks for the roll up windows to save a buck.
yeah,
Like I don't need automatic windows. Just leave it as a roll up. It's fine. I don't need that.
yeah. That's good. So you became a crew master. So after that training at Little Rock, we went our ways. Did you have any other schools that you needed? Like for me, when I left Little Rock, my final school was SEER up Air Force SEER school was up at Fairchild. Did you already? Does the Marine Corps have their version of it? Do you go to the Navy school for that, or what other schools did you have to do to finish your crewmaster training?
So, because I was already a crew chief, our steer school is right after our C school when you first get in.
Okay.
And yeah, it's ran by the Navy. You either go to, I forget where it is on the West Coast. I think it's Washington, or you go to Brunswick, Maine. And since we were out of Pensacola for our aircrew school, we usually went to Brunswick.
Okay.
Um, but so after that, after we parted ways, I went back to Cherry Point, North Carolina. And then I think right after that, I went to WTI again. For anyone who doesn't know, WTI is essentially the Marine Corps' version of like Top Gun, right? You go to Arizona and into Yuma, Arizona, and you do, I forget, I think it's 6 weeks of air to air combat and rapid ground refueling. And WTI stands for Weapons and Tactics Instructor. So you go there to work with all the other aircraft in the Marine Corps, work with infantry. It's a big joint operation
Oh
where
wow.
you put it into practice. Like how does it work? When a C-130 needs to refill an Abrams tank, or how does it work when we need to drop off this cargo to troops on the ground? Um, so we did that. I did that a total of 3 times in my career, going to WTI. And then right after that, we started working on training for the Harvest Hawk, which is a really cool platform. And I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
No.
So when we were in Afghanistan, we had a problem getting close air support as quickly as we wanted from the Air Force or the Brits or whoever else we were working with. So the Commandant of the Marine Corps decided that he wanted his own close air support, and he wanted, because C-130s can stay in the air so long and burn circles in the sky, he wanted them. And his initial idea, if I recall correctly, was to essentially build an AC-130 for the Marine Corps. And of course,
Oh,
the Air Force
nice.
was like, absolutely not. That's our platform. That's our job. So the Marine Corps, being the
That's
Marine
their
Corps,
bread
said,
and
"Fine,
butter,
we'll make
man.
it modular." Yeah, he's like, "That's fine. We'll make it modular like we do everything else." So we worked with Skunk Works at a Lockheed Martin and tested and developed this aircraft called the Harvest Hawk, which is a normal C-130, but the left aero refueling pod gets replaced with a pylon with Hellfire missiles. The back left paratroop door gets replaced with a pressurized door that can contain two Griffin rockets at a time. And
Classic
then
Marine
the
Corps.
yeah,
That's awesome.
the left external pod gets a targeting system that we nicknamed R2D2 because it looks like him
Yeah.
sitting upside down under the external tank. And then we had a cargo platform that rolled into the back of the plane and plugged into all of our cannon plugs. That would be called, I just drew a blank for the name, where the Wizzo sit, right?
Yeah.
Your weapons officer would sit in the back. So we would have the targeting system and the classic Call of Duty infrared camera and everything for targeting people at night and stuff. Um, so that was really cool. I never thought when I signed up for C-130s, back in 2005, that I would have been on a weapons platform. But there we were in Afghanistan.
Wow.
That was 2013. Um, the first crew that actually flew it in combat was out of California in Miramar. And I believe we were the second crew. We came out of Cherry Point to relieve them, and we took over the platform. The Harvest Hawk, if I recall correctly, had more kills in the first year in Afghanistan than every other plane in the entire Afghanistan engagement. So
Wow.
we were doing engagements multiple times a day.
That's interesting. So you referenced the CISO, the Combat Systems Officer, right? Was
Mhm.
that in addition? So when the Marine Corps made those mods, did you always fly with the CISO, or was that necessary as a result of those weapon systems being added to it?
It was necessary as a result, and they decided the best way to do that was to train our current pilots to be Wizzos instead of bringing on a Wizzo from, say, F-18 Hornet or something and training them
Okay.
to be on a C-130. They decided it was more beneficial and easier to take our existing C-130 pilots, like the aircraft commanders, and train them into those weapon systems.
I see. So because an Air Force, what we call them CISOs, Combat System Officer, and then so Marine Corps WISO, Weapons System Officer.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I had no idea. That's really cool information, and it speaks to the not well. They are extremely durable, the C-130, but the adaptability of the C-130, which
yeah. The
obviously
adaptability
I'm
and modularity.
Oh, it's. I mean, I'm biased, of course, because of my time on a C-130. Love it. It's just the places it's taken me and just the experiences and whatnot. I recently flew on an HC-130, the J model, and I went on as an additional duty crew guy because I wasn't J model. I couldn't do. Air Force is real particular what you can and can't
Yeah.
do. Um, I always joke. I'm like, hey, especially enlisted guys, you enlisted folk, just tell us what to do and we'll do it. Tell us what not to do, we won't. Tell us what to do, we'll do it. That's pretty much a checklist. But anyway, I flew in the HC-130 as an additional duty crew, and they had these in the paratroop doors. They had these, I don't know what the right, just, but it was a full panoramic glass plastic.
Yeah, like that plexiglass.
Yeah, because HCs are rest. I forget what the HC stands for. In the
Refueling cargo, if I recall right.
refueling, and so their primary mission is search and rescue. So they need the Loadmasters need these more of an optics, better optics. So I
Yeah.
was so we're flying. I'm like, this is a really, but I say all that one because I just it was a really cool experience, but objectively it speaks to how durable and adaptable the C-130 is, and what it can
Mhm.
do. And then with what you were saying, how the Marine Corps adapted that. So let's go back to that a little bit. How long? So when the commandant, am I saying that right? The Marine Corps commandant said, "Hey, this is all
Yeah.
right, Air Force. Fine. You don't want to give us the secrets to the AC-130 worldwide. We're figured out. You know, thanks, but no thanks." Right. So that decision was made. How long did that process take? Because here you got to experience that. I assume on the tail end of your career, or close to the tail end of your
Yeah. That
career.
was actually my last deployment overseas was with the Harvest Hawk.
Okay.
Um, so obviously I wasn't in the beginning when the commandant spoke to Skunk Works or anything like that. So I don't know exactly when that discussion happened. But from the time we started testing like the alpha model of it to the point where it was deployed in Afghanistan, I want to say maybe a year and a half, 2 years at the most.
That's still pretty, and in the aviation world, that's pretty rapid.
Yeah.
That's
Because again, that
that's
didn't exist at
expedited.
all before.
Yeah.
So you're talking, the aerodynamics of it, redoing all the electronics for a pylon that now has locks that hold Hellfire missiles off the wing. Like, there's a whole lot of integration that has to happen, especially something like the C-130. For everything to be calculated, right? Because you're doing basically laps in the air while holding a target, with your plane
Yep.
banked. So all that has to go into your targeting system, to your navigation system. They all have to talk to each other. So the fact that all that got done and coordinated, I could be wrong, but I want to say year and a half, 2 years tops was when it was deployed from when we started initially talking about and testing it with Skunk Works.
Man, you still have some crewmasters and loadmasters still in school, not even operational. And here they pushed a platform all the way through to make it operational from a slick
Yeah.
to a AC version of it. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I never heard that. Wow, that's what I love about these conversations, because you get to learn something pretty cool and new every time, and especially like operational and tactical. That's an awesome story, and for you to experience that, I mean, that again, I'm speaking as a crew. I empathize with that, and I'm like that. That's exciting when you get to experience and be a part of that.
Yeah.
So something totally, essentially almost brand new operational, and be a part of, and then to carry out a mission with it. That's a whole nother level of, damn, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we talked about, the C-130 does so many jobs already. So going into that and um, like I worked with them on the invasion of Marja when we did that was, as far as I know to this date, still the largest coalition operation in history in Afghanistan was the invasion of Marja, which is in Helmand Province. If anyone doesn't know, it was where some of the most violent combat happened in Afghanistan. Um, Me and my buddy Thampy were part of the crew that did that invasion, and what they did was really cool. They shut off power to the whole town, basically. We went on MVGs, and then again, the C-130 has this really cool capability.
Yeah.
We can put a ramp in the back that has what's called battlefield illumination tubes. We push them out the back, and we have these special ones that, again, not just we, the military in general, the Air Force has them too, like Lu-19s, which is a battlefield illumination flare that lights up in infrared. So anyone on NVGs can see it, but everyone else doesn't see anything, right? It's pitch black in this town,
And it's on a
and the
parachute, so
SEALs,
it comes down
yep,
at a slow descent,
at a
so it
slow, yeah,
illuminates. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. Yeah.
yeah. So if you look outside your NVGs, they picked a night, where there's no moon or anything. It's pitch black outside, but as soon as you look through the NVGs, it's like the middle of the day. So it was
Yeah.
really cool to be part of that. And we had a stack, I think, all the way up to like 28,000 feet. We had, V
Wow.
22 Ospreys, we had F 18s, we had AV 8 Harriers, we had Air Force, Marines, Army, and SEALs on the ground. We had Brits that were working with us. So it was a huge joint uh, operation. Australians, Brits, French, everyone was involved in it. And it was a really cool to be a part of something like that. But then, we weren't the ones doing offensive operations during that. We were dropping battlefield illumination for everybody else.
Yeah, like support.
So
Yeah,
to then a
support
couple years
services.
later come back and be the one firing missiles and dropping rockets is a pretty big change.
Wow. Yeah, I'd say. Um, wow, that's pretty cool. And to speak to what you're saying about the coordinated effort and working with the different branches of service, I could say, again, from my own experiences, I've experienced that more than the average Air Force person, right? Outside of a C-130, because of it is when you deploy and you're doing tactical stuff, you're working with other services more often than not, because it's just how it is. We
Yeah.
essentially are providing a service, whether we're airdropping in supplies, munitions, to getting people to their uh, destination that they need, fobs, whatever. It's really cool to hear you say that, how to be a part of a coordinated effort, because that's that's pretty when you reflect on that, and regardless of what branch we're in rescue, man, we work with all the services to execute I'm going to say it again. I said I wouldn't, but here I am, hack the mish. I think that's what we're gonna, maybe can we call this episode hack the mish, just for the sake.
Go for it.
All right. So it's great hearing those experiences. How you we talked about your training, but then you talked about all that training, how it put you in that operational sense in the aircraft. And I'll put a little plug out here, but I just only because I just got done watching it, is Masters of the Air, and it was
Love that
Army Air
movie.
Corps. Oh my God, what an amazing series!
Well, I guess
And
not. Yeah, not movie. It was like a 10 episode mini
yeah,
series or whatever. Yeah, really
uh,
good.
man, was that good, man. I know it was Army Air Corps then, or two, but just to see the crew dynamics, um, and granted, it's World War II, so we're working with the Brits, and mostly, especially in the flying aviation world. But to see that coordinated, those experiences is something to see, as far as what you're doing, because whether I know it was B-17s, and they were dropping bombs and all that stuff, but you're doing something for another, well, whether it's close air support, or you're paving the way for, whether it's the Marines, Army, whoever's on the ground, to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
It's, I think, really cool, and to be a part of, and that's one of the things the C-130 community does best, is
Yeah.
to do that. So
Um, won't get political or anything, but you can see this even currently, like with Ukraine and Russia and all this other stuff. The Marine Corps has a very big mentality, and I think overall, this would be the military in general, especially the U.S., is that no matter what you do, unless you're infantry, your job is to support infantry, right?
yeah, and
Everything is
that's
about the guys on the ground. So no matter you're in the plane, you're artillery, you're in a tank, everything you do is to support the infantry that's on the front lines.
100%. And I can't say for everybody, but I think a lot of people, especially, again, I'm generalizing here. This is a very general statement I'm about to make. But most people who join the military want to be the tip of the spear, right? Well, that's the tip of the spear. But yeah, that's great. The tip of the spear is absolutely essential, right? But the
Right.
spear, that's a big ass
It's
thing.
also
Well,
a fraction of the people.
yes, like, what?
Not
There's
everyone
nothing
can be a
wrong.
Navy SEAL.
Yeah, exactly. And it's at the end of the day, it's a coordinated effort. Yeah, that tip of the spear is the final blow delivery, whatever you want to call it, to to complete the mission, right? To do what needs to be done, right? But I seriously, I was just thinking about this a few days ago. It's like, I don't know if it was from watching that series, Masters of the Air, or just for, getting ready for our conversation here today. But a spear, what average size of a spear? 6 feet, right? Six. I don't know. I don't know what the standard size of a spear is, but that is a critical part. You need to have that spear just right. There's a lot of essential parts to that, and it speaks to your point, Shane, that it's our job. If you're not the infantry, if you're not on the ground, if you're not the operator on the ground doing all that stuff that we hear about and that we know about, generally speaking. It's the support that tipped the spear, right? And there's a lot more of that spear than just the tip, right? So I
Yeah,
don't know. I
that
just
was going to be the point I made. Like, if you just had the tip of the spear, you wouldn't do much damage, right? You couldn't throw it accurately. You wouldn't have the weight behind it. So I think your analogy is pretty adept. That yeah, the tip of the spear is great. Everybody wants to be on the the edge. They want to be in infantry. Again, like I said, in high school, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Everyone wants to be gung ho on the front lines, the special operator. But a group of Navy SEALs is not going to take Afghanistan. Is not going to turn the tide of war in a main scale skirmish. You need everything else: the artillery, the Air Force, the Navy. All these supporting roles that are enforcing, or like we like to use, that are force multipliers, right?
yeah,
And again, you see this in Ukraine. Like they have some people on the ground there, but they need the support for anti-aircraft
yep,
artillery. They need drones and all these other things that yeah, the guy on the front line is great, but there's only so much you can do as one individual operator. You need all those other resources at your disposal.
yeah. This would be a good transition segue into what you're doing now, but like um, with IT and software development, like input output, right? Binary code, right? You're only as good. Your output is only as good as your input, right? And your input is your behind the scenes support services, right? And in the Air Force C-130 world, most ops groups are comprised of a support squadron and the airlift squadron, right? The OSS, the operational support squadron, and they're a lot larger than the airlift squadron because all that goes into it. Again, generalizing here, generalizing. I think for one to get one aircraft off, it takes about 100 people, 100 different sets of resources, whether from all that
Need
goes
the
into
yeah,
maintenance.
you need the maintainer, you need the maintenance chief that checks to make sure everything's been done. You need the guy who's refueling it. You need the wand holder to taxi the plane out. You need air traffic control to let that plane leave. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a pretty conservative estimate that at the end of the day, you need a lot of people to support that one action.
and I I've been in long enough where I remind myself like how important that is, and to humble yourself, because again, aviators can have a uh, well, we know Top Gun. There's certain. I'm not comparing the C-130 cargo world to fighter pilots, but there comes a certain sort of ego that comes with being part of an air crew and flying an aircraft, and there's this a
Yeah,
sense of I'll say it, sense of entitlement, as far as like, you do what I say when I say how I say it, right? But you got to remember, man, there's a lot that goes into what gets to get wheels up, right? There's a lot,
right.
and so I'll get off my soapbox with that, but just to just share how much that goes into it, and
Yeah.
all that.
Um, so what you were saying, relating back to the IT field, we have a saying: "Garbage in, garbage out."
Yeah,
Right.
that's it. Yeah,
So
yeah. Okay.
yeah. So if you're building a program or you're doing anything as far as computers go, and this goes, I think, pretty well with almost anything in life. If you're not putting the effort in, or you're not putting in good data, you're going to get the same thing out. Right. You're going to get the garbage out. So that's
Hmm.
why I would say good advice for anyone, anything they do in life, is to always put more time in planning than they do to execution. Because I forget the saying, but basically an hour of planning ahead of time will save you 5 hours of catch up on the back end, right? Because it's much easier to plan ahead and have a better plan when you go into it than it is to figure it out on the fly and still come out with a optimal outcome.
Yeah. No, that's fair to say about that. Well, say for like a 2-hour training sortie, right? there's probably, I don't know what the force multiplier is, but there's a lot more planning than execution when it comes to, say like a 2 hour attack mission, right? A tactical training mission where we're throwing out a sandbag at the parachute door. That takes about 5 hours. Like say takeoff times like at 12 o'clock. We're signing in like at 0700, right? It's like, man, what am I going to do for 4 or 5 hours? It's to speak to what you were just saying. The input, you're planning, you're anticipating, you're doing all that needs. You're anticipating so you can adapt and adjust when those deviations present themselves in the moment. Um, so I know we kind of like jumped into it. People are like, why are you talking about computer software development, and all this other stuff? So a big portion of the Acknowledge Action podcast is just talking about the journey, right? So talk a little bit about that. You're in the Marine Corps, I think close to 9 years, right? I hope I'm getting my
Yeah,
years right.
9 years.
So 9 years. How long have you been out? Talk a little bit about your transition, some of your post military experiences that you've had. What have those experiences been like for you?
So I don't know. I have to ask you about the Air Force for this, but I will start at the beginning with what in the Marine Corps is called SEPs and TAPS, which is a class that's supposed to prepare
Yeah,
you for transitioning into the civilian world, right?
it's called TAPS. I
Um,
think that's a DoD term, like Transition Assistant Program. I forget what the S stands for, but um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, separation and transition, whatever. The military loves acronyms. I don't. It's been 10 years since I got out, so some of the acronyms are not as forefront in my mind anymore. But anyone who listens to this, if you're still in and you're planning to transition, I would highly encourage you, even a year out, start reaching out to companies or the school that you want to go to when you leave, and start getting that set up ahead of time. Don't do what I did and get out, move across the entire country, and then not have a plan basically, except I'm going to go to school. Um, it worked out, luckily, mostly because I was not above taking a low paying job at Home Depot, working in the electrical aisle starting out, um, while I was going to school full time. But, it's not easy. Going to school full time is already, if you're doing a challenging degree like computer science or, any advanced mathematics, whatever, um, it's going to be difficult enough and enough of a time constraint that having a full time job on top of that is a bit much to ask. Um, but you can set yourself up for a lot of success, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I didn't. I never got told this in SEPs and TAPS or anything either. But if you have a job that you want to do when you get out, you can actually coordinate that where your squadron, your battalion, whatever, air, ground, whatever you're in, um, they can actually allow you to leave early to go start training for this new job when you separate. So you could actually still be getting paid from the military as you start getting trained for this new career or new job that you want to start. Um, so again, planning makes everything in your life a lot easier, right? So I
yeah,
wish I had known that when I was getting out. And anyone, if you're still in, just know that that is available to you, and your greatest resource is networking, right? So LinkedIn, reaching out to people at companies, whatever you want to get into, that could help you tremendously as far as your capability to get out and transition into the civilian world without too much heartache.
that's great advice. And I'd just like to add just a pointer to that is regardless of what branch and what job you did in the military, whatever your MOS was, your naval rating, your AFSC in the Air Force, etc., very structured. You're told what to do, when to do, how to do it, generally speaking, right? Very rarely did you have the opportunity to ask open-ended questions for your own curiosity, right? They were quickly
Yeah.
shut down, or you were like, "All right, I'm never asking that again," or yes. But when you start making that transition to the civilian sector, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that, you said LinkedIn. That's how we've kind of passively stayed in contact over the years. Maybe not directly through direct messages, but it's like, man, oh, Shane's doing this. He went. went from doing the Home Depot. I know you were. I don't want to blow up your spot. You went from being then to a police officer to now being a software developer, right? Uh, but my point in saying that, and I'll get to it here, is be uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Reach out, build that network, ask those questions that you were never, quote unquote, allowed to when you were in the service, right? Hey, I'm curious about this. Let your curiosity run wild. Seriously, that's how you're going to build your network. People like that. People in the civilian sector generally like to be like, oh, cool. He asked me this. I'd love to help. Instead of the military ever, why are you asking? Excuse me. Like, do I have an, does, what do you think? There's an open door policy? Like, what, who's your supervisor? Like, it's a
Yeah.
lot different. You know what I mean? And that takes time. That takes a little bit of reverse conditioning. That's probably not the best
Yeah.
term, but that takes a form of approach that there's not a lot of structured training for that. It's just more like, hey man, just do it. Be uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Oh yeah, right. Thanks a lot, Matt. Okay, got it. But you got to get out of
Yeah.
your comfort zone. You got to be vulnerable and ask those questions. Worst case that's gonna happen is it's gonna be radio silence and people are gonna won't even respond to you. But the people who are willing and able will be like, yo, yeah, Shane, thanks for reaching out, man. Yeah, I'd love to help you out. Uh, should I go for this degree or should I go get a certificate in IT? And I think most of us, like, going back to what we said earlier, most people, regardless of where you live in the world, like want to do better and do good for themselves. But I think generally people like helping one another, whether they get something from it or not, whether it makes them feel good inside and hey, that was cool. I'm glad I helped them out, or it's like a structured. I'm your coach, and there's going to be some sort of formal exchange. But um, that's what I just wanted to highlight that and share that with transit, because I know they don't talk about that in TAPS. I know that's not something that they they just don't have the time. They don't have the rain. It's not. I'm not knocking TAPS. It's not a criticism. They just it, it's hard to get 100 pounds of crap in a 2 pound bag
Right.
when it comes to
I will throw a
transition and
little bit of shade at
adjustment.
that because at least in the Marine
Oh,
Corps that I know, there was a lot of, I think at the time because they were having retention issues, there's a lot of trying to scare you out of leaving the military.
yeah, I've
You know,
heard that.
that you
Yeah.
won't be successful or that people don't want you. Man, there's so many opportunities out there. The military can be a great career, but I think the vast majority of people would benefit from leaving at some point to the civilian world because you can make more money, you can, have better benefits and all this other kind of thing. So I think that it can be great, but I think the vast majority of people obviously are not going to do 20, 30 years in the military, right? So don't be afraid if you want to change and want to do something else to leave, because I know that was a big push when I was at the end of my career. Everyone wanted to scare you into staying into the military, that you wouldn't be successful outside of it. Like you said, I've been pretty successful at multiple careers at this point in my life. Police officer. I worked for Lockheed Martin for a while as a hardware engineer
Oh
in
wow.
one of their data centers. Um, and I'm not special. I'm not Stephen Hawking. I'm not super intelligent. But I like what you said earlier, and I think the quotes from P.T. Barnum is "Comfort is the enemy of progress."
Mm.
Man, how true is that, right? The more that you want to be comfortable and not be challenged to do things, the more you're not going to grow, the more that you're not going to get that next promotion or, get into a better career field. Man, I can't tell you how happy I am to be in software engineering with the company I work with now, because being a cop was very rewarding. Today's climate, I don't know that I would suggest it to anybody. A lot of cities and counties are so afraid to stand up for their officers that they'll throw you under the bus in a heartbeat, even if you did nothing wrong. Don't get me wrong with that either. There are more than a few bad officers out there that I think should absolutely be terminated and have possibly criminal charges brought up, but that's not the vast majority of them. Just like the military, right? Like, we have crappy people everywhere.
Yep.
But those individuals should be punished, and you should not judge the entire career or the entire, whatever, name it, religion, race, whatever, based on what some people do. Um,
Yeah. What's that saying? This is probably trivializing a little bit. If one person poops their pants, you don't put diapers on everybody. You know what I mean? And
right.
that's sometimes the mentality of when organizations do that. They either overreact or underreact. But again, that's a whole dynamic that
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
a whole
even
nother
going there.
ball of
I mean,
wax.
but like it's yeah, I hear what you're saying as far as like there's pros and cons to whatever um, career you do, whether it's the military, whether it's civilian law enforcement. To you just have to find what speaks to you and what makes sense, and it takes being uncomfortable to figure that out. I think that's a
Yep.
necessary. I'll make a bold set. I think that's a necessary that you got to get uncomfortable. You got to get vulnerable because you're never going to know. You got to have that like test, if you will, to a certain
Yeah.
extent. You know.
Yeah, and I don't know who initially said it. And again, I listen to Joe Rogan once in a while, and one of the best things I think he's ever said, and he's not the first, I'm sure, is that the true freedom is being disciplined, right?
Hmm.
And that seems counterintuitive unless you think about it, that the only way to truly be free is to discipline yourself, right? Because you can't have all the stuff that you want unless you're disciplined enough to follow a certain path and get to what you want.
That no, I completely. That's so true. Like whether we, I don't think we wake up and say, I want structure. I want discipline today. Like maybe some people do. And, once you really own it, okay, so let's once you acknowledge that, right? Why we're here, acknowledge to action, right? There's discipline in that. There is absolutely that's a critical ingredient to any recipe of success. Discipline, right? And yeah, so yeah, I was. It's gonna come to me. I'm gonna stop right there. There was a thought I had, and just I'm not disciplined enough to be in the moment with it right now. It'll come back to me. Oh, that's what it is, right? I think discipline is. I don't know if I read. I don't know where I got this source of inspiration. Probably from LinkedIn because I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and there's so much great material out there, and my network grows every day, which I'm very thankful for. But discipline, I think it comes starts with repetition, and this we could speak. You and I could speak this from basic training, from aircrew training, right? It starts with repetition, then you get into a routine, and then you get into a rhythm. And I think once you meet that rhythm piece, that really speaks to the defined discipline you need to achieve. Now that discipline needs to be consistent, needs to be reliable, all the stuff that because a broken scale can be consistent, but you want to make sure the reliability, the integrity piece is there, the honesty piece was there. Again, that's just something I read somewhere and I was thinking, I was like, man, what is discipline? I mean, we could have, what is leadership? What is this? What is that? But really, at the end of the day, as long as you know what it is, self discipline, that's what matters most. And if it means repetition, routine, rhythm, all that stuff based off integrity, honesty, workable stuff, yeah, that more often than not, that's going to lead you to being successful or achieving your goal.
Yeah. So one thing I just thought of too is that for some reason we don't really talk about this in society, but I don't think there's ever been a millionaire or in this point in time a billionaire that was successful in their first try,
Hmm.
right? Every single person failed the first time, the first multiple times usually.
Oh yeah.
And we don't talk about that. We have this misconception that, Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or Elon Musk were all just immediate rock stars and they just, knew exactly what to do, nailed it the first time, and were instant successes. That's not the case. And it's not the case for anyone that I know or anyone that I've ever heard of. And it's that discipline and that determination that, what's that old saying? It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It just, all you got to do is get up one more time than that.
Well, there was I'm sure Rocky said that. Sylvester Stallone said that. Like, it's
Yeah.
not about how many times you get in it, but I think he was the author of The Alchemist. Oh man, because I don't want to cheat. I'm going to stay in the moment here. I don't want to Google stuff, but the author of The Alchemist said, um, it's not about failing 7 times. It's about what you do that eighth time, or it's not about falling 7 times. It's about getting up 8 times.
Right.
I'll put it in.
Paulo Coelho,
That sounds right. I'll
I
put
think.
this in
Yeah.
in our YouTube notes for proper reference and citing. But um, I was, I just again just it's interesting how timing works, and here we are talking about it. But yeah, it's not about falling 7 times. It's about getting up 8 times, right?
Right.
And that eighth time could be the eighth time might have been for I keep I'm drawing a blank on his name, Mr. Tesla. You just said his name,
Elon.
Elon. The eighth time was when Tesla came to fruition, or SpaceX, and all these things he's known for, right?
Right.
And Bill Gates with Microsoft, and Steve Jobs with Apple, all that stuff. It's we don't. To your point, Shane, we don't hear. We don't focus on the hundreds of fail. I don't know if it's hundreds, but the metric of failure. We just hear about that success because that's the shiniest object in the room that we want to,
Right.
which rightfully so. It's good to
Right.
talk
Well,
about.
people don't want to hear about the challenges getting there, right? They just want to hear about how great it is at the top.
Yeah, it's well, that speaks to, like, that's why we embrace the journey. That's why it's so important. Like, we get so fixated on the destination. I want to get this degree. I want to get this job. I want to do, but like when we achieve that, it's like, wow, this is just a waypoint. This is just um in our flight plan. This is just one of many variables in our journey, right? It's
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we could have this plan in our head and say, all right, here's the recipe to what I think success is. But one, yeah, we could achieve it. We could get that degree. We could get that job. But it's like, wait a minute. There's no finish line. There's no end point to this journey. It's ongoing, and we constantly
Right.
have to meet ourselves where we're at, reinvent ourselves, adapt, adjust, all that stuff that comes with figuring out. And that's not something any TAPS class is going to, and you know, address in a short amount of time. When whether we're doing a 9 year career, a 5 year enlistment, a 24 year retirement, whatever, there's it just takes a long time, and you got to be okay and accept. I'm not saying, oh, I can't wait to fail today, but you have to be
Yeah.
receptive to that. You have to be open to it. You do. And again, like you
Yeah.
said, Shane, that's not something we society bangs the drums with. Hey, let's talk about failure. But
Yeah. Hey, let's
it's
all
only
fail.
after the successes we hear all the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a really great take on intelligence. I think it was yesterday. Um, Being smart isn't knowing the circumference of the earth or knowing, y equals mx plus b or any of this other stuff. Truly being smart as a human being is being intelligent enough to know if you're presented with facts or information that would change your point of view on something and you change your point of view on that. That to me is a smart person.
Hmm.
Right? The world is an ever changing place. We know more yesterday than we did a year ago, and we're going to know more next year than we do now. There are some things that we are very certain of, but even the theory of gravity is still a theory. We haven't even proven that gravity exists, right? It's a hard thing to prove, and I'm not saying that gravity isn't there, but it's interesting when you think about it. Like even something as fundamental as gravity is still not proven.
Yeah, it's not. It's like 1 + 1 = 2, right? Like that's okay. That's what it is. That's how we conceptualize it. Those are the variables that make this equation, right? But with gravity, yeah, like you said, it's a theory. It's
Right? It's the best theory we have so far, but it's still a
Yeah,
theory.
it, it,
And there's
it
a lot of holes in our understanding of physics that we still don't know, what dark matter is, or why we don't know where all of it is, because there should be 50-50 in the universe, and there's obviously not.
oh man, we could really go down some good black holes with this conversation where we're going, man. We could go on and on. Man, you're that's that. Um,
We'll save that
no,
for next time. It's a teaser
yeah.
for the next episode.
Well, no, that's how it's interesting you bring that up. Like objectively, as speaking of evolving, changing, adapting, the in the near future, I'll say it in the near future. I don't know exactly when, but I'll know when here soon. I want the Acknowledge the Action podcast to have like a monthly. It's like open-ended podcast. So I'm looking at different streaming services to facilitate that. And what's going to happen is you, me, a couple other veterans who've been on the podcast. We're just gonna, all right, hey, you know, the last Friday of the month at an agreed upon time, we're just gonna show. We're gonna have some. We're gonna have a plan. We're gonna have a general idea. We're just gonna show up and yeah, we're gonna BS and have some fun, bust each other's chops. But we're gonna have like an objective. There's gonna be an objective, like, hey,
Yeah, you got
let's
to
talk
have some
about
kind of structure, or a bunch of
yeah.
veterans that'll go off the rails real fast.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But what I have in place, what my plan is to have that like call in. So it's like we're put out like, okay, hey, Matt and Shane are going live on, I think StreamYard is a big one that allows you to do that. I didn't even think Riverside allows it too. Then people could call in. So it's like, hey, yeah, I got some free time. They could call in and they could join in on the conversation as well. So that's interesting. You bring that. Yeah, change my philosophy and theory in life. There's two things in life that are guaranteed, and that's death and change. Everything else is open for interpretation, and
I thought
everything
you were
else
going to say
around
death
us.
and taxes.
Well, taxes are people can evade taxes, but you can't evade
That's true.
you can't evade death, you can't evade change. So, but in all seriousness, like we're constantly always trying to figure things out to manage. I don't want to get too morbid here, but to focus on change, right? It's like
Mhm.
change is important. Like I'm gonna come up with a slogan here. It's like change is tough. Put it in the tip box here. So it's like like here, you don't want your change, I'll take it. Here's some, and I'll give you some tips back, right? So like we need these sort of conversations and dialogue to just help us acknowledge when we're going through some tough times, and change is overwhelming, and it more often than is when we're not thinking about it in an active way. So and that brings us back to the transition and readjustment. And I'll just drop one more quote, and then um, I like to ask you, you know, what advice and message you have for the audience as far as what we talked about today and all that. But um, the time to plan for a rainy day is when the sun is shining. And I heard that, and I talked about this on my first episode of the Acknowledged Action podcast. I got that. I'm a big 1980s cartoon nerd. I got that from the Thundercats. Panthro was talking to Lion-O about change it, and it was so profound. And I didn't remember that when I was like 8 or 9 when I was watching it. But as I'm watching it with my son, I'm like, dude, that's awesome. That I think about that, and it's so true. It speaks volumes. You got to plan for change when you're structured. Before wheels go up, you have to plan for the unexpected, for the worst case scenario. Hope for the best, expect the worst, and usually you get somewhere in between, right? And I think that's the significance of acknowledge to action and all the stuff a lot of stuff we talked about here today. But and then what this podcast represents is just being able to meet ourselves where we're at, identify the challenges, identify the tools we need to put in our toolbox to help us address those anticipated challenges that are going to present themselves, and learn to be
Yeah.
comfortable with. I know it's cliche. I'm dropping lots of cliche stuff here, but be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think what
Yeah.
would help, and it's a mindset. It'll help prepare for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I used to always think cliches were dumb, and then someone brought it up one time and said, cliches are cliches for a reason because they're true,
Hmm.
right? Like you can make that joke all you want, like oh, it's so cliched. Like, well, there's a reason it became a cliche because it's true almost all the time, right?
Well, I dare. I'm going to be daring, and I'm going to say something. And I wouldn't say this in a room full of Marines, but well, let me start off objectively. Every branch of service has their core values, right? Air
Mm.
Force, integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. And you say them enough times, it becomes cliche, right? It's like, all right, we get it. Integrity first. Yeah, service before self, excellence in all we do. Acknowledged, I get it. But when you sit there, I think about it, maybe because I'm older, what I've been around the block, whatever you want to call it. That means something. Those core values actually means if you stop and think about it, and think about those too. So what I was going back to what I wouldn't say this in a room full of Marines, but Semper Fi arguably is a cliche thing. Like always faithful to what? Those are probably the core values. I can't speak to that because I wasn't part of that ethos, but you hear it all the time, and that means something. That means a hell of a lot. Those are two words are powerful, man. Always faithful, right? Always faithful to what? And I believe that might be an individual thing. That might be the ethos of the Marine Corps, or it could go beyond that. I don't know. But what I can speak to are the core values of the Air Force and how I'm, you know, reflecting on those more often than not now. Because when I was 17,
Yeah.
18, I just was going through the motions. Yeah, okay. It was just regurgitation. But now it means something to me. It does. And
Yeah.
I'm almost done. I'm on the tail end of my career, so I'm not cashing in any bonus points with the Air Force. I'm not gonna get rank or anything out of this. It's how I feel. It's a personal thing for me. So
Yeah. Um, Small point of distinction. That is our slogan, and you're right, Semper Fidelis. But our core values are honor, courage, and commitment for the Marine Corps.
okay, so is your slogan? So would it be appropriate to say you're always faithful to those core values, or
I don't think
what's
anyone's
the
ever made
context?
that association or that distinction because every almost every branch has their like Latin slogan or Latin saying for that branch. Ours is Semper Fidelis, but the core values is something different, and that's like you said, something that should be instilled in every Marine. That these are the core values that you want to live by and do your work by.
That's a good point, and we need those. Like we need those, whether they're core values or if it's the mission statement of the branch of service we're in. We need those reminders. We need those, like going back to the word we're using. We need those cliche reminders to keep us in check, to keep us calibrated, to keep us mission focused. Right, whether it's a personal
Yeah,
mission, because we're gonna get the shit kicked out of us at times. Life is gonna wear us out. But when we have whatever speaks to us, so whether it's the slogan, whether it's the core values, whatever it is that the tools we have in our toolbox to recalibrate us, ground ourselves out, recharge us, whatever you want to call it, we need that. We know nobody's impervious to fatigue, overwhelm, burnout, all that stuff. But what we can do to supplement that is those ethos. I'll say those emotional sort of uplifting
yeah,
um, statements, and yeah. So that's so
yeah.
my
I
bad for
agree.
calling it core values. So slogan but we get it. The point was,
Yeah,
yeah, it's there to because we need something. We need something to get us through those tough times, especially in times of hostility, war. One last drop on the Masters of Air when they were in that spoiler alert. So if anybody hasn't watched it yet, when they're in that POW camp and they raised the flag, well, we all know what happened in World War II. We know the outcome. So when they put the American flag up, man, that moved me, man. I'm like, holy crap. But it took ethos, and that's we could have another conversation another time. But like what we learn in SEER school, the stuff we need to do to get through those arguably what would be the most challenging times in our lives if we're ever taken captive. What are we doing to keep ourselves grounded and to keep, yeah, to get through that, and to see that flag get raised like that was just like, wow, that was moving, man. And that
Yeah.
took core values, that took mission slogans and all that stuff to endure that, and to do that. And I could only imagine what that does if you're in that environment, what the spirits does. I could go on and on about that. I'm like a runaway train. I get going. I'm going to slow this train down. I wanted to come to a stop, but Shane, I want to thank you for being here today. But before we go, I'd like to ask you, what message or what parting advice do you have for our listeners, as they navigate, their path, whether they're in the military. I know we talked a little bit about that. If you're in the military, or if they're a veteran, or if they've been out, or wherever they are at in their journey, what advice do you have for them to just to help put some tools in their toolbox, or help sharpen those tools that they already have?
So I think we spoke about a lot of them. Determination, you have to have discipline to have true freedom in your life. One thing I would suggest, I read this book a couple of years ago, and every passing month, I just feel like it's more and more relevant to now. It's called "Hard Times Create Strong Men" by Stefan Arnio.
Okay.
Um, Phenomenal book. It's a little misogynist in it sometimes. It was written a while ago, but the core message of it is there's a very ancient poem. I don't know if you ever heard it, called "Strong Men Create" or "Hard Times Create Strong Men Create Good Times Create Weak Men Create Hard Times."
I've heard, yes, I've heard
Yeah,
that.
so it's basically a cycle. He talks in the book about we're essentially in society on like a 40-year cycle. Obviously, World War II was a very hard time. Men that came back from that war were strong men. They helped build the society and the businesses that we have today. Well, the problem is once everything gets really good, right? No one has to work as hard for everything, and we end up with a creating hard times for ourselves because we
Mm,
create a bunch of weak men that allow that to happen. And I think we're in that position right now. Again, not to get political or anything else, but I think we're in a position right now that is a very hard time for this country, the world in general. Um, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever seen so many open wars in my lifetime right now happen across the entire world right now, right? Like
yeah, there's a lot in
Haiti
progress.
has no standing government at the moment. It's being ruled by thugs. Ecuador declared a state of emergency because of the problems they're having. Iran and Israel, Ukraine and Russia. I mean, you could go on for way too long, unfortunately, with the state of the world right now. It's going to be a hard time coming, and we need more strong men. And again, you know, that's a general term, men, women
Yeah.
also, but men as in human, right? That's for a long time been a general word that's used to represent humanity is man, right? So we're not saying it's only men. We need strong people to lead this country and to lead this world into what I hope and I think is a better tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's a great message, and it's true, and I'll supplement it with there's just my own personal thoughts is that the current state and the current person who's benefiting from, so those hard times from post World War II to now is a byproduct of that, and a big thing I think about often is access. We need access to get empowered, to become strong, and all that stuff that comes with making us, um, that. So I think we have to take more of a conscious approach to, like, all right, what can I do to strengthen myself as a human being, as an individual, so I can contribute to society, make it better, and prepare for those who want to erode it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um, ironically, with all the wars and battles and all the conflicts that are in progress taking place, ironically, it's we're not directly learning from that. Those aren't necessarily the hard times that we need to, like, iron sharpens iron, right? There's another cliche right there. Iron sharpens iron, right? Like, no, it's true. And I think that
Yeah.
that's an appropriate, like, we need those difficult, hard times to become strong, and to become resilient and all that stuff. And I think it's a good point that you say. It's just something we should be aware of as a society. So regardless of where we're at in this society, how can we contribute to that? How can we help each other out and make, going back to what you said earlier to the podcast, we just, generally speaking, human beings just want to do good, be better, and make a good life, right? It's all the other in between stuff that gets lost in translation.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for sharing your story, Shane. And if there's anything you think of, after we wrap things up here, I could put it on the YouTube channel. You're always welcome back. I'll definitely, once I get all the details worked out as far as that joint call. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, so I don't want to.
I think we should call it joint operations.
Joint operations.
Yeah.
No, that's a good joint operations pot. And then we got to come up with an acronym then too, so people, it keeps people. There's a sense of mystery, but practicality.
I think you've been in the military too long, Matt. You're still looking for acronyms.
Oh man, yeah. So, so cool. Hey, so one last question for you. What's, we have our playlist that we've been building, which is getting pretty. I gotta admit, I am enjoy listening to the Acknowledge to Action playlist now. But what song do you want to dedicate to that Acknowledge to Action playlist that's accessible on Spotify? And Spotify's not giving me anything for that. I'm just letting you know the access point for it.
So I know one of the episodes I listened to, you were talking about transitioning over to Apple Music or something at some point.
Yeah.
That's what I have. I don't use Spotify. Whole thing about that, but being a technology person, but I dedicated the Hammerhead by the Offspring.
Okay.
It was a song that came out when, good Lord, I think I was in middle school or high school, and in the gym, in the military and everything, I'd listen to that song and it would just get me pumped up and ready to do whatever I needed to do. And it's a song to me about that dedication and being willing, to go in and do the hard things to keep other people safe.
No, that's awesome. Adding an Offspring song to the playlist. They were a really cool band. Like, I'm trying to remember, like, what happened. They were pretty cool. They're nothing ever crazy controversial. They were good, man. That's a good. They had some good albums and some good songs, man. That's a great one. So thank you for that. And I am gonna. It's just Spotify was a line of sight for me.
No judgment.
Yeah, but I'm a big Apple guy, so I'm gonna work on that Apple playlist. But it's gonna be accessible. So thank you, Shane, man. Thanks for sharing your story. It's great. It was awesome to reconnect with you. Like I said, it's been 10 plus years. I think we last saw each other in 2011 when we parted our ways from Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas. But I know indirectly we've stayed in contact, but I look forward to staying more in contact with you and having you on again here on the podcast and in our group, joint mission podcast, call online. So yeah, man, I can't thank you enough. So I appreciate you. And yeah, man, anything you could think of afterwards you want me to add or want out a link or some resources you think of, or put it on the YouTube channel. Well, I'll get it on to the Acknowledge to Action website as well.
Yeah, sounds good. It was good to talk to you, brother.
Yeah, same here, man. I look forward to staying in contact, and we'll talk soon, all right?
All right, man.
All right.
Thank you for listening to episode 14 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. Here are some key takeaways. C-130 Loadmasters in the Marine Corps and Air Force have similar roles but different training paths. The Marine Corps combines the crew chief and loadmaster roles into a single position called crewmaster. Experiencing different cultures through deployments provides valuable knowledge and understanding. Embracing discomfort and change is crucial for personal growth and success. Discipline, determination, and core values are key to overcoming challenges and achieving goals. failure is often a stepping stone to success. A soundbite that I appreciated from this episode, and a quote now, is true freedom is being disciplined. This one stuck with me, and I hope it sticks with you too. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. Don't forget to check out our playlist on Spotify and now YouTube Music, where the songs dedicated from guests symbolize the unwritten journeys we all embrace. Keep pushing forward and believing in yourself. Wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone. Until next time, this is Joint Operations on the Acknowledge to Action podcast.